Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to trace the long and, let's be honest, really complex history of the Israel-Palestine conflict. We'll be using our source material to walk through the key moments that got us to where we are today.
Okay, so let's just dive right in with the big question, right? The one that really frames this whole story. How did a place that's sacred to so many people become the heart of such a long and painful conflict? Well, to even begin to answer that, we have to go way, way back.
So, here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with the ancient history, move into the promises made in the 20th century, talk about the partition and the wars that followed, look at the uprisings and the attempts at peace, and finally bring it all into the modern era. All right, first stop, ancient history. Because you really can't understand the modern conflict without knowing just how deep the roots go for so many people in this one small piece of land.
You know, this land has been a crossroads for pretty much forever. It started as the ancient homeland for the Jewish people. But then, empires came and went. The Romans conquered it and gave it the name Palestine. Then, in the 7th century, the Arab conquest brought Islam, and suddenly, Jerusalem became holy to a third major religion. For hundreds of years after that, the whole region was part of the Ottoman Empire.
Okay, let's fast forward to the early 20th century, because this is where the modern conflict really starts to take shape.
A huge piece of the puzzle is this movement called Zionism. As persecution of Jewish people grew in Europe, this idea took hold, to return to their ancient homeland and establish a national state. This wasn't just an idea, it led to tens of thousands of people picking up and moving to the region.
And then boom, World War I completely redraws the map. The Ottoman Empire collapses, and European powers, mainly Britain and France, carve up the Middle East. This particular area, it fell under British control.
Now here's the crucial part. Britain makes a very public promise, the Balfour Declaration, to support a Jewish national homeland in Palestine. You can imagine, this just poured fuel on the fire. You had Jewish immigrants arriving with this promise in hand, and the local Arab population saying, wait a minute, this is our land too.
So the aftermath of World War II, and specifically the Holocaust, is what really turns this from a regional problem into a massive global issue. It becomes a major turning point.
After the horrors of the Holocaust, Jewish immigration into the region surged. The violence between Jewish and Arab groups just got worse, and Britain basically said, we can't handle this, so they washed their hands of it and punted the whole problem to the brand new United Nations.
So what was the UN's big idea? Partition. They came up with a plan to split Palestine into two separate states, one for Jews and one for Arabs. The proposal gave 56.5% of the land to the Jewish state and 43.5% to the Arab state.
Well, Arab leaders immediately rejected the plan. And you can see why they were upset. The Jewish population at the time was only about a third of the total, but they were being given over half of the land, and the more fertile land at that.
So the moment the British officially left in 1948, Israel declared its independence. And I mean almost immediately, 5 of its Arab neighbors, Egypt, Jordan, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, invaded. A full-blown war was on.
When the fighting finally stopped, Israel controlled way more land than the UN plan had even suggested, and for Palestinians, the result was devastating. Around 750,000 of them either fled or were forced from their homes, creating a massive refugee crisis that they call al-Nakba, which means the catastrophe.
But the war in '48 was far from the end of it. Fast forward less than 20 years, and another war. This one, incredibly short but decisive, is about to change the map all over again.
And what an outcome. In just 6 days, Israel completely defeated the combined armies of Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. Its victory was so total that it ended up in control of a huge amount of new territory: the West Bank, East Jerusalem, Gaza, the Sinai, and the Golan Heights. These became known as the occupied territories, and they're at the very center of the conflict to this day.
Okay, so the decades after that '67 war saw something new emerge: organized Palestinian resistance. But also, and this is important, the first real major attempts to actually negotiate a peace.
After 20 years of living under military occupation, Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza had had enough. In 1987, a huge uprising erupted. This was the first Intifada. It was a mix of protests, boycotts, and yes, a lot of violence that went on for years. All that violence actually pushed both sides toward the negotiating table, which led to the famous Oslo Accords in the 90s. And this was a massive breakthrough. For the first time ever, Israel officially recognized the PLO as the representative of the Palestinian people, and the PLO, in turn, recognized Israel's right to exist.
So what did this actually look like on the ground? Well, one of the key results was this incredibly complex division of the West Bank into 3 zones. You had Area A, fully run by Palestinians, Area C, fully controlled by Israel, and then Area B, a messy mix of joint control. And believe it or not, this system is pretty much still in place today. But that hope for a final peace deal, it just fell apart. The really tough issues, the final status of Jerusalem, what to do about the refugees, the growing Israeli settlements, they were just too difficult to solve. And in 2000, all that frustration exploded into a second, much bloodier uprising that really shattered any hope left from the peace process.
And that brings us to the 21st century, where the dynamics of the conflict shift once again.
So, a few things happen in quick succession. First, Israel pulls all of its troops and settlers out of Gaza. But then the militant group Hamas violently takes power from the PLO. In response, Israel imposes a really strict blockade on the entire territory. And what follows is this devastating, repeating cycle of brutal wars between Israel and Hamas.
So after going through all this history, from ancient kingdoms to empires, promises, partitions, wars, and blockades, we're left right back at a fundamental question. Given all the escalating violence and all the failed attempts at peace, you have to wonder, what on earth will it finally take to break this cycle?